Welcome to the Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast, the podcast for high achievers who want to stay sharp, focused, and full of energy despite their diagnosis. With your host, National Board Certified Functional Medicine Health Coach, Julie Michelson, where Julie helps you take your power back from autoimmunity. And now here's your host, Julie Michelson.
Welcome back to the Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast. I'm your host, Julie Michelson, and today we're joined by Dr. Catherine Clinton, amazing naturopathic physician specializing in autoimmunity and psychoneuroimmunology. She shares with us her approach to autoimmunity and why what you might have been told autoimmunity was wrong. Join us to hear no-cost action steps that you can take today to jumpstart your healing. And perhaps the best part, none of them have to do with eliminating anything. Catherine, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I'm so excited that you're here with us today.
I am as well. Thank you so much for having me. I'm just so excited to talk with you about all of this stuff today.
Fantastic. I know our passions overlap, and I always love to start with your personal journey, because for the most part, we all kind of got into this world through our own personal journey. And I know you have one too. So share with listeners, how did you get to be doing what you're doing?
Absolutely. Well, when I was in medical school, I was in my second year of naturopathic medical school, and I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, an autoimmune condition which attacks the colon. I was diagnosed with Hashimoto thyroiditis, which is another autoimmune condition that affects the thyroid gland. And I was diagnosed with Lyme disease and multiple GI bacterial parasitic infections. And it was rough. I think most of us are familiar with that kind of initiation phase that happens in medical school. And that's right where I was, long out, in the clinic from 7 a.m. till 7 p.m. And I just didn't have the foundation, the resilience, so that stress really was the straw that broke the proverbial camel's back, so to speak, right? And I was in the perfect place for that. I was surrounded by the most amazing naturopathic physicians, regular MDs, acupuncturists, Chinese medicine doctors, and they really helped me piece that physical health back together. And I think that's where most of us who are dealing with chronic disease and autoimmune conditions rest in, right? That goal of getting back to where we were before we were diagnosed or before we got ill. And I think the most profound thing for myself and my patients has been that physical piece is incredible. But once we get back to, when all the pieces are back in place, we can realize that lifestyle, that status of energy is what got us sick in the first place, right? So there's another real level to healing, sort of a psychoneuroimmunology piece to it, how our thoughts play into it, how we sort of fit in the world around us. And that has been really the most amazing piece for myself and my patients. And so that is my story. I have reversed those autoimmune conditions. I don't need medication or anything. I do need to tend to myself. And but besides that, yes, I'm doing well, and just really excited to be able to share that with everyone out there.
I love that. And I all too often with the physicians I talk to, medical school was the trigger. It's like, when are we going to change what we do to the poor human body and mind in medical school? But I will say, I think you were maybe the first one I've spoken to that had that support quick enough, because especially, the MDs or the DOs, they didn't have they didn't have acupuncture. They didn't have, any naturopaths. They didn't have that broad community that you had. That is amazing that you were able to start to heal so quickly. I always say, I used to think I was so smart, but I spent over 11 years declining with RA because I believed my doctors when they said I couldn't heal. And so I get really excited when I hear people that were like, no, this isn't going to happen. And even with like me, it wasn't just one diagnosis, it was multiple, because that's what tends to happen.
Right. It's that body saying, are you listening? Nope. Okay, here's another one.
Yeah, I can be louder. I can get louder.
Yeah.
So you threw out a big word, and it's a word that makes me smile because I love the study of it. Psychoneuroimmunology. Let's talk about that. Let's, get into. Some listeners might be like, what? Did she make that up? What is that? So let's start there.
Absolutely. Let's dive into that one because it's a huge word, right? But basically what it means is the ability of our thoughts to change our biology, right? And so what we used to think, when I was in medical school, we thought that a lot of the body communicated with chemical messages, cytokines, neuropeptides, hormones, that kind of thing. Now we know that there's direct innervation, right, from the brain directly into the cells that line the GI tract. So there's a direct, instantaneous route from our brain to our gut. And that's really what psychoneuroimmunology is about. It's about how those thoughts and frequencies can really, really have a profound effect on our biology. One of my favorite studies looks at trauma, and trauma has a significant impact on our biology. And one of the most significant things it does is it shifts our microbiome from a beneficial state of microbes to a more harmful state. And it increases, because of that, it increases inflammation and intestinal permeability. But this study looked at cognitive behavioral therapy, being consciously changing those thought patterns. And I think it was a 12-week session, they completely reversed that microbiome derangement, right? So that shift to the more harmful species shifted back to all those beneficial species that we want in our microbiome just through the power of changing the way we think. So it's really incredible.
It is. I'm covered in goosebumps. You can't see on camera, but I am actually in the middle of writing a presentation that will have already aired by the time this does, on the importance of creating the healing mindset to facilitate healing. My story took the same track as yours, in that I was able to, thank goodness, heal my body enough first. And now in my practice, as I would imagine you use in yours as well, now I flip flop and we're going right in, and let's get the mindset accelerating the healing. So I love that. I say to people, and I love watching you won't change expression. You may smile, but it always surprises me that people just really don't know. I say, the body hears everything you say, every thought you have, and it takes it as truth. And that's the key right there to that study, right? Because the good news is, once we become aware of that, we can give it positive, we can intentionally plant those positive thoughts. And that's where I totally geek out. And that's why I wanted to start with this, because it is so powerful.
It really, really is. And, as somebody that suffered from anxiety throughout my life, on and off.
Oh, me too. Shocker.
Yeah. And so hearing something like that can be heavy, right? Just like, oh no,
Yeah.
And
It's
what
like
was
talking
another
about
one?
toxins and how they're everywhere. And it's like, okay, no,
Right.
wait. It doesn't mean it's all bad. I swear.
Right, right. Because the power of a positive thought is not dependent on us holding that thought forever, right? It's just as transient as the negative thought. So it's more about patterns and more about empowerment. The ability to do that a few times a day really routes that neurological pathway so that those few times a day become automatic, and you can add more times to the day, and then you spend more time in that positive nourishing state.
It
And
feels good.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And I love that. I think that is so key. People resist because, if they're in this stress loop and they're either anxious or, fatigued and like, and you want me to have positive thoughts, like that seems so foreign to so many people. But this knowledge we now have that you don't even have to believe it, like just start doing it and let it work its magic.
Yep, absolutely. And it's a wonderful thing to open up that window into a relationship with ourselves again, right? When we are chronically ill, dealing with autoimmune conditions or mental health, anxiety, depression, we have a distrust of our body, and we get disconnected, comfortable in there, right? A panic attack is not comfortable.
Yeah.
So yes, so opening up that window so that we can access a deeper relationship with ourselves, a sense of safety in our own body is so foundational to health. That's what I love working with people on, getting that safety from ourselves, getting that safety from the world around us, because that's what our body is really looking for. When we talk about autoimmune conditions, if we were to Google it right now or internet search it, it would come up as your body attacking itself, right? And it so isn't. That's such a misnomer and a misunderstanding. And it really takes that relationship, that neurological communication of our body for granted, because what's happening with autoimmune conditions to messages in our environment, right? And if we can replace some of those danger messages from processed food, from feeling unsafe in your life, family, community, where you work, driving to work. I mean, there's so many places where we can get stress, toxins in our air and in our water. There's so many danger signals that are being sent to our biology. And when we can replace those danger signals with something safety signal that our biology is really looking for, whole food, clean water, clean air, then we can start to build that safety outside of us. And that's just an amazing thing to see with myself and my family and my patients, is having someone who's unwell and feeling so fundamentally unsafe rebuild those connections with themselves and with the world around them. It's just a passion. I can't think of anything better.
I share that passion. It's magical. It's science, but it's magical. All the stuff that sounds so woo-woo, it has so much science behind it. And I think being able to use that with, at least for me, being able to use that with my clients is, I know it's rooted in science, but it is magical to watch people blossom. And it is such a natural part of autoimmunity and chronic illness to even completely without awareness or intention get to a place where we feel like, oh, my body is my enemy, right? Like I'm in pain and maybe I'm not as mobile, and it's especially when we get into that cascade where it's not one diagnosis, it's 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. And so it is so essential. I always say, you have to partner with your body, because the more you're feeling, again, it's hearing all of that. So I am so I share your passion for that. And I'm excited for your patients that that's the approach that you're taking with them. You know, how do you view, I think you already gave it to us, but when a patient comes to you, in your practice, how do you view autoimmunity? Like, what do you, and I know I am pretty sure you already said it, but I want people to really hear that, it's a very different perspective, and it's a very accurate perspective.
Yeah. I think that's where most people come to me, right? They have been tested up the wazoo, tried their most likely steroidal kind of, drugs, and they're not feeling relief, and they are feeling betrayed. They're feeling like their body is broken. It's not their friend anymore. And so that's what I start with. I start with explaining that it is not your body attacking itself. It is your body that it has evolved on this earth for millennia with all kinds of different messages that are really quite literally written into our DNA. And we're searching for that when we are interacting in the world, when our microbiome is interacting in the world. We are searching for those signals to see, where are we? Where's my place in the world? Am I in the right spot, right? And so much of modern life is a dangerous signal. Processed foods, toxins, the chronic stress that we're under. I mean, if we look at the last 2 years, my goodness, right? Incredible amounts of stress and fear and so many obstacles. Our modern life really sets us up for some danger signals that we have not evolved with. So what I talk with my patients about is removing some of those danger signals and replacing them with signals of safety. So this doesn't have to be overwhelming. It doesn't have to be a huge exclusion thing, right? Even if you're in a place where you're like, I will not try another diet thing. I will not exclude another thing from my life. That's understandable. Or at the same time, I can't, right? I live in an unsafe community. My workplace isn't safe. I don't feel safe in the world, and very likely aren't, right? So even if we can't remove those danger signals, we can pile in the safety signals so that our body is not, it's like a messaging center where you're just getting like, there's a fire on floor 2, there's a fire on 13. And, you've got your operator, go here, go there. And people are panicking, and it's a chaotic system where our biology is used to this orchestra of all these different messages that cascade to biological action in our body. And so even just adding those in can be such a powerful thing. That's where I like to start with my patients, because simple, free things that we do at home can be really life-changing. And for someone suffering from chronic illness and autoimmunity, having that window of hope open can be the most powerful thing, right? Because that's where we see our patients, right? They come to us, and we're the last hope,
Yep. Yeah,
and
absolutely.
the hope is super high,
yeah.
Right? It's like a last ditch effort. So it's, okay, let's open up that hope. Let's pile in those safety signals and just see. Just 1 week of it can make a profound difference in our physiology and how we're feeling. So that's where I start with patients.
And I think that's incredible and fantastic. And what I love the most is that you talked about adding in, right? Because so many people, full disclosure, eventually when I work with somebody, we do eliminate certain foods, but there is such a takeaway approach for people that, again, by the time people find me, it's the same thing. They show up at my doorstep that most often there is the occasional, I just got diagnosed and it's a heck no, and I'm going to do something right now. But usually it's a journey. And yeah, it's like, what more, don't take another thing away from me. So I love that add in because it is so important. We're already feeling deprived enough when we're not well. So
absolutely. Absolutely. And we can eliminate those foods and really form those new connections with foods when we feel happier.
Exactly. Or have the energy to, or I had literally a client say to me yesterday, she had shifted from, I reminded her, I'm like, you are the same woman who said to me, this is so hard. And the processes we all go through, it's so unfair that I have to eat so carefully just to feel halfway decent. And yesterday she said to me, because she made the shift, she said, I feel so fortunate that I get to feed my body the things that nourish it. And it was like, oh, you're doing it. This is awesome. Yeah. It's the shift. I love it. So you mentioned amazing things. You mentioned, no cost, free things that people can do to get started. And I always ask every guest for one thing, but you are ultra generous. And I know you're going to give us 3. So what are those things? What can, listeners just start doing right now?
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the biggest things that I think people can do is balancing our circadian rhythm, right? So one of the things that we have evolved with, one of our major safety signals, is that we live on a planet that orbits the sun, right? And we live in rhythm with that sun. And so when we wake up and we get AM sunlight in our eyes before 10 a.m., it sets a whole cascade of hormones and neurotransmitters. We get a flood of serotonin, which gives us energy and feeling good. That same serotonin, actually, when the lights are lowered in the evening, when the sun goes down, that turns into melatonin. And that's our sleep hormone. It actually has really incredible antimicrobial immune benefits as well.
Yes, important right now.
Yeah, exactly. And we've got dopamine and growth hormone, all these things happening with that AM sun. Getting a little sun in your day also maintains that.
Without your sunglasses on, everybody.
Absolutely. And so I'm here in Oregon, and there are times when we don't see the sun for weeks, literally, right? It's just this gray background, and that counts.
Yes.
It's outside natural light. It can be rainy and dark and dreary. If the sun just came up or it's before 10 a.m., that's what's going to trigger all those things. It doesn't have to be tropical, wonderful sun that you want to, lay down and soak up. It's just natural light. It's being in that rhythm. And when we lower the lights at night, watching that sun go down triggers another whole cascade physiologically in our body. And what I like to do is kind of make it a tradition. So when the lights get lowered, like here, it's dark at 5, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So we have to sort of adjust our inside lights to something that doesn't throw as much blue light and white light out there. Salt lamps. I feel really fortunate that we heat our house with a wood stove so that we can gather around the fire at night. That's a fun thing to do. There's all kinds of different ways to turn this into a routine. So it's not this like, I gotta go out and look at the sun, and this schedule that you must adhere to. It becomes this relationship with the sun and with the rhythm of the seasons that is so important for our biology. And I like to actually stack that with getting in contact with the earth. And so again, it's cold outside.
You stole I was going to say, if it's not freezing, it's what I do every morning, actually, even when it is cold. But
yeah, no, absolutely. And I'll be honest with you, I do try to go out and be barefoot and and do that in the morning as a routine. My kids, especially my youngest, is so good at this. She is our like cheerleader.
Yeah.
Some mornings I'm like, I am lucky to be outside moving. I'm going to keep my shoes on. I do not want the cold on my feet. And you can get that same benefit from touching a tree, sitting in the grass, touching the ground, touching something that's living, even just being outside puts you in contact with those negative ions that just enormous amount of antioxidant potential that's out there. So just even, I would challenge people listening today to try this for 4 or 5 days a week and notice the difference. Notice the difference in your sleep and your energy and your mood. Is it a cure-all? No, but it's part of this messaging system. And that's the idea, is that there is no cure-all. We live in this ecosystem and we're constantly messaging within ourselves, with our microbiome, with the world around us. So those two are so important. And, there's, oh boy, now I'm having a hard time choosing about the food one.
I know, because it's like the list is so long. But I love it. I can't wait to see what you're going to choose next.
I'm not choosing. I'm going to tell you. I'm just going to go really quick because I can't choose. Diet is another huge one. So getting like omega-3s and resistant starches in our diet build our resilience across the board. So they shift that microbiome to a more healthy composition of microbes. Those resistant starches reach our colon undigested. So our microbiome ferments those resistant starches into short-chain fatty acids. Those short-chain fatty acids literally feed the mitochondria in our cells, right? That powerhouse of the cells. And that decreases intestinal permeability. It decreases overall inflammation. And it increases our T regulatory cells. And we haven't talked about those, but our T regulatory cells are those kind of superheroes of the immune system. They go in and they stop autoimmune reactions. They put out the inflammatory fires of the body. So something like resistant starches is a great way to, when we're choosing what we need to eat, right? Including some resistant starches from onions, grains, garlic, leeks, asparagus. These things have such a profound effect. And omega-3s, same thing. They will do all of those things that I'm just mentioning. And is it because, omega-3s, we've isolated this compound? And no, from my perspective, it's really because we have evolved forever around waterways, eating seafood, eating sea vegetables, and it's written into our DNA. It's such a massive signal of safety. One of my favorite studies is with infants in the NICU. And so they separated infants from their mothers at birth for medical reasons. It was necessary, right? But the researchers knew that separation would cause trauma and stress, and it would cause that shift from beneficial microbes in the biome to more harmful species. And of course it did, right? They tested, and that's what they saw. Exactly, shifting to those harmful species in the microbiome of these infants. And so what they did is they supplemented with omega-3s in the breast milk bottles that they were giving to these infants, and they saw a complete reversal of that shift, right back to having beneficial species like we should have in our microbiome. And why is that? Did that make the infants feel like they were with their mother? No. No, they were probably still holding on.
Still traumatized. Yeah.
Still traumatized, right. But what it did was it offered their body, their biology, physiology, a massive dose of safety. Like,
I love that.
This is traumatizing to be away with your mother, but from your mother. But you are in a safe spot. You are in the place that you should be in this ecosystem, and you have the resilience to weather this trauma, which, I mean, it just gives me goosebumps saying, because that's what we're talking about, is replacing those danger signals, or even just adding as many as we can in, so that our body starts to quiet that chaotic, inflammatory sort of panic that happens, right? And just regulate and rebalance out. So I really love those three things. And geez, the list goes on and on.
I know. I'm cutting you off so we don't go over time. Maybe we can do this again and you can share more of the list. What I love, I really think my favorite part of everything we've covered, the really big takeaway, is that we just need to move the needle. You don't have to fix everything all at once. You don't have to find, I have people that come to me and they're like, I've been looking for a diagnosis. I'm like, I'm so glad you don't have one. You don't identify with it then. Like, that's one piece we don't have to work on. It doesn't matter. We're going to just do the work and it's going to be great. But it's about moving the needle, right? It's about adding in those safety signals that increases your energy, quiets that immune system. And then all of a sudden, like you said, then you can work on diet. Then you can work on some of these other things. And so, I got into functional medicine via biohacking. So when I say you're speaking my language, you are speaking, you use the word stack, and people always are shocked when I say, we really need to work on sleep and circadian rhythm. And I want you to get morning sunlight as a step one. And they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, it is a rhythm. It's a cycle. I even, just to throw out a tip of my own for that nighttime, I use some red lights in my house as well. Yeah. Because sometimes I am on the computer, and even if I have my blue blockers on, I just want to make sure. I think of, when we think of our lighting, it is literally, what were we exposed to? The sun rises, we get the blue light. Sunset, we get that nice orange red light. It's that simple. We don't have to go live in a tent, but like you said, just getting in touch with it. And there are plenty of days here in the winter. It's even though I know it would be good for me, I don't want to stand barefoot on the earth. Yeah. Early in the morning when I'm out there getting my sunlight. But what I do notice, and that's the thing, as we take these steps, we become so much more aware. I work from home most of the time, and I notice that, like, if my energy is dipping, I can go outside and get a few minutes of sunlight, stand in the grass barefoot, and it's like I'm fresh again. So yeah, it really is effective. So effective.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And for any parents listening out there, it's such a great thing for kids, that cranky, too much thing. It's like, go outside and you will come back, relaxed and a little more.
But there's so much more in touch with it, I think, than we are. We tend to shut all of that down over time. And so the kids, they may not know they feel it, but they feel it. That's why your little one is like, it's time. Let's go outside, stand in the grass. I love it. And you see, every year when we go to the biohacking conference, you see just hordes of us standing outside, either, when we first get off the plane and get there, and then in between. And I'm sure, the people at these hotels and conference centers are wondering, like, what the heck is going on with everybody standing around barefoot?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I spoke at a conference this summer and took some time in between to go swimming and was laying on the concrete, instead of on the normal lounge chairs. And somebody was like, you have to tell me what you're doing. It's like, well, there is some antioxidant potential here. So I am charging up in my 20 minutes as much as I can. Yeah. No,
we are energetic beings. We need to recharge.
Amen. Absolutely.
I love it. Well, before we wrap up, where can listeners find you?
Well, they can find me on my website, which is Clinton.com. And those are my social media handles. You can find me on Instagram, on Facebook, and this is what I do. I just love to give this content out all the time so that we can be healthier and happier together.
I love it. And all those links will be in the show notes. Catherine, thank you so much. You overshared so much gold with us today. I would love to have you back to do it again, because I feel like we definitely have more we could talk about.
Oh, I'd love that. And it was just an honor to talk with you today. I love what you're doing. This is so needed. So thank you.
Thanks. For everyone listening, remember you can get the show notes and transcripts by visiting inspiredliving.show. I hope you had a great time and enjoyed this episode as much as I did. I will see you next week.
Thank you for listening to Julie Michelson's Inspired Living with Autoimmunity. Did you enjoy this episode? Please like, share, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to get a transcript of this and every other episode, just head on over to inspiredliving.show or click on the link in this episode's description. There, you can also find everything we discussed in this episode, including links and information about our guest. You can even send in your questions to be answered by Julie in a future episode. That's inspiredliving.show. Until next time, this is Julie Michelson's Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast, helping you take your power back.